beautiful Canada. A country with tundra, forests, prairies, and rocky mountains. It has 3.5 million square miles of land, making it the second largest country by total area. Canada is known for hunting and fishing and all sorts of other activities. And one of those activities is the lovely sport of curling.
All right, here we go.
Now, I may be in Canada to hunt, but I'm also here to do as the Canadians do. I mean, how hard can that be?
Well, Nick, how you doing back there?
This isn't my first time in Alberta, but this is my first time hunting moose. And needless to say, I'm excited. I'm hunting at Northern Wilderness Outfitters with Donald McClanahan. It's our first morning out, and we weren't even 5 minutes into our hike before we had our first moose sighting.
I walk over here and I'm like, oh, surely that's not a moose. I mean, that's crazy talk. We haven't been walking 5 minutes. There's a cow and a calf in the water right there, which I consider to be a good omen. Or maybe that's the only damn moose we'll see the whole trip.
The early history of Alberta is closely tied to the fur trade and all of the rivalries associated with it. Early on, this brought literal battles between English and French traders. While there were many animals associated with the fur trade, we came across one of the most important almost immediately, the beaver. And just on the other side of the river from that is an elk. Most people don't realize that there is a huge population of elk here. And ironically, I do have an elk tag, but I need to keep my eye on the prize. I'm here for moose, and that is where my focus will stay. At least for now, anyway. As you can see, we are stuck. Back from hunting, got the truck stuck. Donald has friends in low places, so he called a friend who is now also stuck. We're stuck. Free at last. Now we can go hunt again. Trust me when I say this. Getting around in this part of the world is not easy and definitely comes with some troubles. To find animals in this cover, you have to put on a lot of miles. And on our second morning, we had an encounter that made all the hoofing we've done so.
That's a good way to start the morning right there. I tell you what, I've never been that close to a moose in my life. That was awesome.
Some people would probably say that I overuse the word awesome. But for me, experiencing a close encounter with an animal that as an adult stands almost 7 feet at the shoulder and is 10 feet in length and it can weigh over 1,500 pounds, well, if you ask me, that's just plain awesome. A lot like my home state of Minnesota, Alberta is full of lakes and rivers, and this part of Alberta is dominated by the Athabasca River. It's clear that from 2 days of hard hunting, unfortunately, the moose rut just hasn't kicked in yet. So Donald suggests that we use the waterways to help us cover more ground and hopefully, ultimately, help us find more moose. Success is gauged by the ability to adapt. And since we can't find any moose, we're adapting. The forest here is thick, and it's hard to travel on by land. But by water, we can cover a lot of ground that we would otherwise not have an opportunity to hunt if only by foot. And I have the best seat in the house. Thank you. Thank God for the beavers. They're very industrious and efficient in making push poles. These beaver-made push poles come in handy because we've reached a part of the river where we see moose sign, and that means it's time to quietly drift with the motor off and listen and watch for movement on the shoreline. Now look at him, it's like we're in Italy. The only thing you need to do is start singing. Now, all joking aside, Donald knows this area and he knows it well. And as we come around the next bend, there on the edge of the river stood a cow moose, and we can only hope that she has a gentleman suitor nearby.
Looking behind her.
Donald guides us in quietly. I've never been this close to a moose, and the peacefulness of the next few moments on that river that day will stick with me forever. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, because I was thinking it too. Why couldn't that have been a big 60-inch bull moose? But the truth is, if it had been, then I wouldn't have had this moment, these seconds, in this river. Life unfolds the way it's supposed to. Sometimes we just need to be willing to drink it in.
That is, without a doubt, one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. And also one of the most spiritual and transcendental moments I've ever had in the woods. Silent. We snuck up. She didn't even care we were here.
Out here, things are just different. I could try and explain it all day with superlatives like wonderful and unusual and exceptional, but really, you just have to get out here yourself to understand it. Our next encounter on the river, much to my surprise, are these elk. Most hunters don't realize that in Alberta, there are a lot of elk. When most North American hunters think of elk, they think of places like Colorado and Utah and Montana and Wyoming. But here in Alberta, it's one of their best kept secrets. Elk numbers here have doubled in the last 10 years, and that means Alberta is producing more giant bulls than ever before. See, you learn something new every day. These cows and this young bull were putting on a pretty good show for us, and for no other reason other than just plain fun, I pulled out my cow call and started making all sorts of racket in an ill-fated attempt to try and get that young bull to make some sort of noise. The young bull had no interest in playing that game, but lucky for me, someone else did. We were surprised to hear a bugle in the distance upriver, and when we turned around, there stood this giant bull elk. Remember earlier when I said I had an elk tag but was gonna wait for a moose? Well, I just changed my mind. This guy heard my calls and he came looking for love. I guess all that racket paid off because he saw the cows cross the river in front of us, so he crossed the river. I called some more and he kept coming. It was a perfect storm. The cows stayed close and we waited for him to pop out. I called more, but he never answered again. The light began to fade and we began to give up. In a Hail Mary, I called a few more times, and then he steps out right in front of us.
I can't believe that just worked. What just happened? We just saw some cows over here at a small bull an hour ago, and I started cow calling. Half a mile away, this bull comes all the way across, crosses the water, comes all the way over here, and I just smoked him at 80 yards.
This is one of those moments that every hunter loves and hates. I just shot one of my best elk ever, and we had to get off the river because it's rocky and we don't have any lights. We're in a canoe.
So it's gonna be a long night.
There's an old saying that says waiting is a means of acquiring patience. Well, whoever said that didn't have to impatiently wait for the sun to rise so they could go recover their first Alberta elk. We returned the next morning to track my bull, only to find out there wasn't much of a tracking job needed.
Are you kidding me? Holy moly. Thank you, buddy. No matter how many animals you shoot in your life, and no matter how many pounds of meat you put in your freezer, there's always this moment of a little tinge of remorse, a little bit of respect and appreciation for this awesome animal in his life. But then there's also that kind of like, yeah, this is cool. Thank you, man. I appreciate you.
The hell of a bull.
Choices. We make them every day. As humans, we are creatures of habit. We most often take the easiest path, and we do the same things over and over again. I came to Alberta to hunt for my first bull moose, but when a bull of a different color stepped out, I made a choice that diverged from the original plan. And now, that choice has me on a river, in a canoe, tagged out on a huge Alberta bull elk. It's a beautiful moment that I will never forget as long as I live. And then, the next morning, I take a 3-hour drive to the big city of Edmonton, and I find myself here, the Ellerslie Curling Club. Yep, I'm gonna try something new. Something out of my comfort zone. Something that I will probably suck at.
Dixie Blackmore, Dixie Blackmore.
I'm Nick Hoffman. I approve Dixie's message. This is crazy. I've never stepped foot in a curling, is it an arena, a rink?
It's a curling rink.
It's a rink, so we're on the rink, but this is a curling club.
It's a curling club because it's a club.
Right.
The ice surface is called the rink. Some people will call it the ice shed.
Sure, because they literally, especially back in the day, they were sheds, right?
They were.
It came from probably, what,
Years
ice
ago.
outside? And
you started with on lakes or ponds or rivers, any frozen surface.
Right.
Curling is one of the world's oldest team sports. It originated in Scotland in the 16th century, and it was played in the winter on frozen ponds and lochs, also known as lakes. Some of the earliest known curling stones came from Scotland and date from 1511, coming in at 44 pounds each. In the 1600s, stones with handles were introduced. Back home in the US, curling has always been dependent on frozen lakes and rivers until around 1881, when the first indoor arena was built in Boston, Massachusetts.
So my grandfather did some curling. I know I don't remember him doing it, but I know that he did it in his younger days. It's big in my area, but in Canada especially, this is a major pastime for Canadians, right?
It's a huge sport in Canada,
Yeah.
yes. If you haven't curled and you come from Canada, it's unusual, okay?
Yeah.
It's just what you do in the winter.
Right.
And when in Canada, do as the Canadians do. I meet up with Travis, a proud member of a new generation of curlers. Travis has agreed to be my teacher, but I fear he has no idea what he's getting himself into.
We're gonna grab you a broom.
Okay.
Travis patiently explains that curling is played with 2 teams, and each team has 4 players. Each player takes a turn sliding a heavy polished granite stone, also called a rock, across the ice towards the house, which is a circular target marked on the ice. Each team has 8 rocks, and each player throws 2. While I was visiting Ellerslie, an Olympic team from Korea was there practicing. And after watching them, I'm thinking, this shouldn't be too hard. I mean, after all, I'm a pretty coordinated, athletic kind of guy.
So I watch these guys, I watch this guy. It looks easy.
It looks easy, but you'll find out, I think.
All right.
But yeah, so pretty much to start, you're just gonna put that gripping foot into this hack.
Okay.
This sport has special shoes. One shoe grips the ice, and the other is more like ice on ice.
I feel like a complete idiot.
To get started, I place my grippy foot on the hack and get ready to push off. The name of the game is straight, level, balanced, and composed. I mean, how hard can it be?
It was only a matter of time.
The Olympic Committee in 1924 first introduced curling to the Olympics. Unfortunately, it didn't appear again in the future Olympics until 1998, and it's been in every single Winter Games since. Today, curling is very popular in our neck of the woods. In fact, in the US, there are over 180 curling clubs in 43 states.
Right there, that's the equivalent of the Kobe swish, where he turned around and just walked back to me like, that's how good I am.
Remember at the beginning of the show when I said something about practice makes perfect? Yeah, forget I said that. Now, shooting the stone is only one part of the game. There is also sweeping. The idea behind sweeping is to steer the stone. By sweeping fast, you can heat up the ice and make the stone go faster. It also stops the stone from curling. And depending on how you sweep, you can also curve the stone to the left or to the right. And yes, that was my shot, and with a little teamwork from the sweepers, we just scored a big old point for Team Nick. Conquering the sport of curling is an art form. It takes the deepest of concentration for the shot. And of course, having grace on the ice with your footwork and hand motions are what makes a champion in this sport. Knowing when to sweep, where to sweep, and when not to sweep are the keys to winning. Finally, I got my try at sweeping.
Keep going!
And I'm here to tell you that it's just as hard as shooting the stone. In my case, it was probably harder, especially when you consider how out of shape I am.
My first time sweeping, I did okay, right? I almost fell. I like that you guys have good beer too.
And now that I've made an ass out of myself in front of my new Canadian friends, we move upstairs to something that I'm much better at, and that is enjoying an ice-cold beer. Curling rinks remind me a lot of the bowling alleys back home. Everybody gets together to enjoy the sport, and then everyone retires to the lounge to celebrate a victory or drown the sorrows of a loss. Either way, this is definitely part of the ritual, and I was more than happy to partake with my newfound friends, who, by the way, gave me a gift to commemorate my first time curling, a list of curling excuses, which I quickly put to good use.
My best excuse, which is number 4, I lost my balance with these new shoes.
Balance. It's a struggle, but it should be part of everything we do. We need to be conscious of the choices we make to balance our time with friends, our time with work, our time with hobbies and adventure. I'll admit I struggle with that balance every day. Make the best of it. And if your heart is set on one thing and another opportunity is put in front of you, then you might want to change course and live in the moment. Take the new opportunity. I mean, after all, if I hadn't shot that elk, I might still be chasing a bull moose, which means I would have never made it to Ellerslie to learn a new sport and to meet new friends and try once again to prove that practice, hopefully, eventually, might make perfect. Who knows? If I practice curling enough when I get back home, then maybe, just maybe, someday you might see Hoffman on the back of a jersey curling in the Olympics and then returning to Canada to celebrate with my new friends over an ice-cold Canadian beer. Sounds pretty perfect to me, eh?